everybody. Good evening, good evening. Okay, my audio's okay, good. Good to see everybody here this evening. So glad that you can join us. We're going to be starting here momentarily. We're just giving people time to get on like we always do. And then we're going to jump right into the topic that we're going to be discussing this evening. Welcome to the live broadcast. Again, this is brought to you by Samba Tree. SambaTree.com, where we address health and wellness just for you. SambaTree.com. If you're looking for herbs, if you're looking for natural supplements, check out our website. Again, it's SambaTree.com. People coming in the chat. Hey, Candace, how you doing? All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this broadcast. So glad that you guys could make it and join us this evening, where we are going to be taking a look at how Christian apologists, how they're very selective when it comes to the topic of slavery. And I wanted to get into this topic. Of course, the headliner is a gentleman by the name of Wes Huff. He's been getting a lot of attention as of late because of he defeated the mighty giant of Billy Carson. This was like Goliath, I guess, in the eyes of many, that he was the great Goliath of the world, and he defeated him. They defeated Putin. They brought down China. Mr. Gorbachev, he ain't got no stance on that. No. Billy Carson. If anybody takes Billy Carson down, it's you something else if you do that. I mean, if you look at a lot of the attention that's been given to this, to this gentleman here, and like I said, I see him as any other Christian apologist. They stand on what they believe and they defend it. And that's it. Billy Carson. The thing with Billy Carson is someone that he's been debunked years ago. I mean, he's always, some people categorize him as a con artist. If that's who he is, then people know that con artists are very good at what they do, con artists, and they're always going to have an audience that's going to follow them regardless of what comes out about them. At the end of the day, they're still going to have an audience that's going to follow them. And so, like I said, again, I'm just being real. There are many, many people who already had marked out Billy Carson as far as being an authority on anything substantial. He's more into the, he borrows a little bit of here, borrows a little bit of there. That's his thing. That's his vibe, and he's good at what he does. And so his mistake was thinking that he could actually go toe to toe with someone who is pretty much considered an expert when it comes to defending the Bible. And when you're dealing with someone who, has pretty much committed their lives in doing just that and doing that alone, it's probably not going to work too well for you at the end of the day. I'm just saying. And it didn't work too well for Billy Carson. But for what I understand, Billy Carson, his numbers are still going up as far as subscribers and all that. So I don't think it hurt him that much. At least I don't think it did. But when you listen to many people within the Christian world, particularly in apologetic circles, Billy Carson is, I guess he was like the Antichrist or something. I don't know. But, that's kind of how that is with that. I'm just being real. I mean, Billy Carson's been debunked a long time ago by many people you don't even know. And all you got to do is spend some time here on the streets of YouTube, and you can find that, but there it is. But we're not necessarily, before I start tonight, let me just lay out a couple of things. Number one, this is certainly will not, under any circumstances, be any kind of personal attack against Mr. Wes Huff. I don't know the man, so I'm not going to go personal with him. I don't need to, don't want to. And so what we are looking at is a topic that he touched that kind of crossed my path of things that I am interested in. And that is the whole history of slavery, specifically transatlantic slave trade. And that is a topic that I'm very interested in and have done many, many videos on the topic. It doesn't necessarily make me an expert, but I am pretty interested in it, and I know a few things about it, and what was I going to say? And so when it comes, and over the years, I have listened to, pastors, preachers, apologists, try to frame the Christian involvement in the transatlantic slave trade as kind of something else, that somehow, it was, you had some people who kind of hijacked the Christian narrative and used it for their own, evil purposes or whatever. And that's kind of how it's been framed, and but the reality is it's a lot deeper than that. And, at least on here, you're not going to get away with that. What we're going to do is look at all of the pieces when it comes to this part of our history. And then we're going to let the facts stay where they are. We don't need to season it with anything. We don't need to add anything. We just want everything on the table, everything. When we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, you're talking about a crime, not just a crime, a major crime. You're talking about a crime scene that stretches from Africa all the way here to the Americas, which include the Caribbean and all of that. And then even the slave trade, the Arab slave trade, you're talking a crime scene that literally spreads pretty much all over the world. So just like a investigator or police officer or, whatever, private eye, you're going to make sure that before you, as you're doing your investigation, you're going to make sure you gather as many of the facts, the pieces as possible. And that is what we want to do here on this platform, because I've been seeing this come up a whole lot. And so that's why we're choosing to discuss it. But like I said, again, this is in no way, shape or form any kind of personal attack against Wes Huff at all. And, and so I just prefer to treat it that way, because I think it can get more accomplished by just sticking to the facts, and that's it. And so that's what we're going to do here. So that's what we're going to do in this broadcast here. And again, so glad to have you guys here. For those of our friends and family who are out there in California dealing with this fire, definitely our hearts go out to you. Hope that you're keeping your head up. If you're anywhere in proximity to that smoke, you already know that smoke inhalation is real, and do take it lightly. If you feel yourself getting a little lightheaded or a little bit hard of breathing, just even a little bit, take the precautions you need to take to protect yourself, with that smoke, because as someone who lived out there and someone who lives here, I've smelt, you could, when you smell that smoke after a while, man, it's not good. It's not good for your body and all of that. So do take it very seriously, even though it may not be your house that's being burnt down, but that smoke, being exposed to that is no joke. So be very, very careful. Okay. All righty. So thank you again. I know I keep thanking y'all, but I really do. I really appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in this evening. And let's go ahead and talk about this topic. Okay. Got my notes here, so I just want to make sure I'm covering everything. Now, just real quick about me, my background, for those of you who don't know, because I never like to assume that everybody knows who I am or my background, but my background pretty much is I've been a Christian. I was in Christianity for over 40 years. I was also, so that means I wasn't just a pew setter. I was, everything from, a pew sitter to being on staff on different ministries, both local ministries and national ministries. I've worked for, various leaders on the national level. If I was to mention some of them, I'm sure some of you would know these people just on first name basis. So I've seen quite a bit and know quite a lot. And I've seen the things in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. And so, so when it comes to Christianity, this isn't, I'm not speaking on it as someone from a distance. I'm a distance from it now, but, I have a lot of experience when it comes to Christianity and, doing intense study on history of Christianity, all of that stuff. I've done a lot of those things. Right. Then later on in our lives, we rolled into the Hebrew Israelite movement, and we got into that for a while. And one thing I can say, from that I acquired from the being in Christianity was just my passion to continue to study, to research, to ask questions, and not just to kind of take things at face value, but to to actually follow things all the way through. I'm that guy where if I see someone, the whole church praying for someone who's got cancer, for example, and and nothing's happening, I'm not the one that's going to say, well, I guess the Lord needed another organ player in heaven, or hey, it was just whatever. But I'm the guy that looks at scripture and say, wait a minute, it says we shall lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. Now, why is that not happening? We need to have a discussion on that. And, or other things where it just gets explained away. I don't like that. Right. And so I saw the same things happening in the Hebrew space, which made me say, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so I kind of, I got away from it. We departed from out of that. And we learned quite a bit as well in that. We don't hate anybody within the Hebrew space. We don't hate anybody in the Christian space. But we've just come to the conclusion that there are things in there. The foundation of both of those things are things that I personally don't feel or haven't seen it being thoroughly investigated, honestly. And when anybody does try to make the attempt to do so, then typically what happens is you're framed as, this, that, or whatever. If for those who like categorizing people, I would probably be on the side of agnostic, meaning I do believe that there is a higher being, that designed all of this that we see and hear and touch and feel out here in nature. I don't believe it just kind of just happened and we just rolled up in here. So I would probably lean more towards that than being an atheist. An atheist is someone that don't even believe in God. And it depends on what atheist you talk to, because some atheists, they say they're atheists, but they kind of lean more towards agnostic. They'll just say, I don't believe in the God of the Bible, but I do believe in that there's something greater than us that created all of this. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I definitely will fall along those lines, but so that's kind of a little bit about me on that. So let's go ahead and get started here, shall we? All right. So let's start off with my take on apologetics, period. And if this is your first time or you haven't, maybe you're like, man, you just talk a little bit about everything on this platform. Yeah, we do. I'm just kind of like that. So we'll talk about yesterday. If you didn't see yesterday's broadcast, we were talking about the news, all that kind of stuff, right? And we talk a lot about the news, but we also talk about topics like this too, because I do know that it impacts so many people, and so that's that. So we don't always talk about Bible things or Christian things or, church things or whatever, but it's just all a part of the mix of this weird platform that we're on. Okay. But anyway, what are some of my issues when it comes to apologetics? Well, I would just say this from the beginning. When What I don't necessarily like is what they call having this presupposition angle, meaning that you have already come to the conclusion on this. In this case, we're talking about the Bible, Christianity, or whatever, that is the absolute truth. The Bible is God's word from start to finish. You know, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it, and that's it. It's kind of hard to have a discussion, a real discussion with people, you know, when someone is already made up their minds on something. You know, for me personally, I would prefer to move on. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, if somebody says, hey, listen, the best color in the world is blue, and there's nothing at all you can tell me different than that. The best color in the world is blue. Well, if that's your opinion, then that's your opinion. I'm not going to sit up here and argue and say, no, it's not, it's red. I'm not going to get into that. You know what I'm saying? But some people, that's what they enjoy doing. They enjoy getting in those kind of long discussions. And you see a lot of that on social media, on YouTube today. When I think of Christians, when I think of Hebrews, the first thing that comes to my mind isn't really changed lives. It isn't people getting healed. It isn't families coming together. The thing that comes to my mind, and I'm just being totally honest, the first thing that comes to my mind are people that argue, people that debate, people that pretty much hate each other. That's the first thing that, in my own personal experience, that's what typically comes to mind, what I see. You know, and your experience may be a little different, but for mine and numbers of other people that are out there, that's kind of been my experience on that. Let's see. Yeah. So the presupposition, when someone has already come to a conclusion on something, you know, and that's what they want to believe, I tend to kind of back off and keep it moving. You know what I mean? The other thing is people who cannot address the exact points made without deflecting or throwing personal attacks. That's another one that really bothers me a lot. And it's not exclusively Christians or Hebrews that do this, but I do find that a lot in those spaces, that when you bring someone like me, I look at, when I look at the Bible now, I'm comparing it to actual factual history. Like, I'm looking at the findings of archaeologists. I'm looking at people who have actually gone to the field and have looked at these different artifacts and findings and scrolls and all of that for themselves. You know, people have done, not just people have done papers and that's it, but people who've actually dedicated their lives and on these matters and have the tangible evidence to make their case. So when I look at the Bible, I'm comparing the Bible to those things. Do you understand what I'm saying? The Bible even says, out of the mouth of 2-3 witnesses, let every word be established, right? So I'm taking that at its word. In other words, for me, I'm going to look at the other witnesses that are out there who are investigating as well. And then I'm going to put everything together and see what weighs out, plain and simple. You know what I mean? And so, so that's what I look for. That's kind of how I look at things. So that can be, a lot of times it can be problematic for numbers of people, because when you're dealing with like Christianity or even Islam or whatever, these are faith systems. In other words, these are systems or ideologies that are based on belief. You can believe, as I always say, you can believe in whatever it is you want to believe. You're not going to have any problems with me, but your belief or my belief doesn't automatically translate to truth, and so truth is what I believe we all should be after at the end of the day, regardless of what that truth reveals. That's what we should be all pointing to at the end of the day. Belief has its place, but it's not in any way, shape, or form does it replace the truth. And that's what I'm about here. So anyway, let's move on. So the video that I'm going to be referencing, and I would encourage you to take a listen to it as I did. It was this video right here. I'm gonna pull it up on the screen so you can take a look at it. or listen to it yourself. That one, Slavery in the Bible. This is a video that he did. It was like a couple of years ago, I think. So this wasn't really recent. It's only about a little over half an hour long. And so I'm just going to highlight some things real quick, some notes on it. But like I said, I'm doing my best to, not taking anything at all out of context, right? So the angle that I'm taking is what I did not hear. Some of the things I heard versus the things I did not hear at all, And so that's the angle we're going to take on that. All right. So anyway, so some of the highlights of things that he in this video, overall, he takes the same approach that so many other Christian apologists take when it comes to this whole issue of slavery. Number one, he makes the argument that when it comes to when you're reading the Bible and it mentions the word slavery, if you look at the original translations, it actually is it's not slaves, it's actually servant, and so servant or servitude, it actually has a much different vibe to it, right? And it's not the argument that he makes as well is that when you think of slavery, do not think of slavery when you think of slavery mentioned in the Bible. What he's saying is do not compare it to the transatlantic slave trade, right? Because the transatlantic slave trade, he's saying, versus what's described in the Bible, they're two different things. And it's not just him saying it. There are many other Christian apologists, other people in Christendom who have said the same thing, right? So that's another point that he brings up here. Then he mentions that Israel, when you look at, for those of you who are familiar with in the Old Testament, it's very detailed on a number of things, especially when you get into the book of Leviticus or Deuteronomy. And it's very detailed when it comes to how to do certain things, everything from cooking to how to dress and how to this and that or whatever. And it's also detailed on how to treat your servants or your slaves, right? It's very detailed. And when you read it on paper, it sounds, it leaves a lot of readers with a sense of, well, at least they have some boundaries. Now, I'm speaking for myself, okay? I'm speaking for myself. When I was in Christendom, when I was reading that, listening to these different preachers, pastors, or whatever, when they would get to that part, I was made to feel that, well, it's slavery, but, at least there's some boundaries there. So it's not, so it's not the same as, slavery that, in the transatlantic slave trade. It's not the same as that. Right. And so I bought into that, and so what he said is that Israel's standards when it comes to slavery was much different than that of the standards of other ancient cultures within that Mesopotamian region in that era. And so he said that Israel, in his estimation, like I said, I would encourage you to watch his video, is that Israel had the highest standard when it comes to how they treated their slaves. Well, the only problem is with that statement is that there really isn't outside of the Bible. And I would encourage you, anything that I say here this evening, I highly encourage you to go take the time and look these things up for yourself. The problem with that statement is that there is no known. I mean, if there is some, it's not well known, but there isn't any substantial amount of evidence that shows Israel enslaving anybody outside of the Bible. Well, let's take a look at the people in that region who did have stated policies that we can actually look up, and there's actual evidence that shows that they did have they did have slavery practices in that region. All right, so I'm just going to go down the list. I would encourage you to look these things up for yourself. Okay, so in that same region, this is between the 2500 2500 and 1200 BCE. You had the Hurrians, okay, and you have, and what's the proof of that? They had administrative texts from the Mitanni kingdom, a Hurrian state referred to slaves in temple and palace economies. And so the slavery practices were enslavement through warfare and trade, and slaves worked in agriculture, labor, and temples. So again, there is tangible evidence that we have put our hands on to show that these different cultures had slavery practices in place in that region. The Persians, this is between 550 to 330 BCE. They have the Persepolis fortification tablets. They mention slavery. The archaeological, and I'm sorry, back up. They have the Akkadians. This is 2334 to 2154 BCE. Records from the Akkadian Empire mention slaves in royal temple economies. And so they have contracts and all of that stuff. These are things that you can, again, put your hands on. The Babylonians, who you can't leave them out, 1894 to 539 BCE. The code of, I can never say this word right. The code of Hammurabi. There you go, Hammurabi. Includes detailed laws concerning the treatment and rights of slaves, including punishments for harboring runaway slaves. All right. So again, he said that Israel had the highest standard when it comes to treat the way they treated slaves. The Assyrians, this is 2025 to 609 BCE. The evidence is they have administrative records and legal documents from the Assyrian cities like Nineveh mention the sale and ownership of slaves. The Elamites, 2700 539 BCE. You have texts and inscriptions from the Elamite civilization. They reference slaves, particularly in royal households and temple economies. The Hittites, Hittite laws, they have that also documented. You can put your hands on that. I think I mentioned the Persians as well, right? So you have all of these different cultures that were going around in various degrees. They were all engaged in slavery. But what's the one that you didn't hear? Israel. There's no known record, at least that's out there, that we can actually put our hands on and say, outside of the Bible, in the Bible, absolutely. You know, for people who are in the Bible, if you're just 100%, the Bible is your only sole reference, then absolutely, you have evidence to show that Israel actually carried this thing out. But outside the Bible, you will be very hard pressed to find that they even did any of this stuff. Now, it's written down, but what evidence do we have that Israel, people of Israel, engaged in having slaves of the magnitude that's described in the book of Leviticus or Deuteronomy or whatever? You know, now cultures in general during that time, you did have different cultures that had, you know, servants and things like that. I mean, that was pretty normal during that time, during those days, right? And not just in the Mesopotamian area, but that's pretty much all over. You know, when you look at ancient cultures, they would have servants, or in some cases they would have slaves or whatever. So that wasn't even out of the ordinary. But the argument that we're focusing on here is that his statement in this video suggesting that Israel had the highest standard when it comes to how they treated their servants as slaves. But when you look at the historical record in general, you don't even find any evidence of Israel owning slaves outside of the Bible. It's written about, but we don't have any evidence for it. So again, if you come across something that maybe I'm missing, I would, and don't just give me some general stuff. I want some specific evidence, like the ones that I just mentioned to you, that tell us specifically about Israel or Israelites owning slaves and following these laws and stuff that they put in place here. I actually welcome that, So anyway, let's move on here. Okay. And so, yeah, like he said, he states that one cannot compare Israel's slavery or / servitude to the transatlantic slave trade. And he's absolutely right. When you look at it on paper, when you look at how the Bible describes, how to treat servants, how to treat slaves, when you look at it in the Bible and you compare it to how slaves were treated in the transatlantic slave trade, he's right. He's absolutely right. But to a measure. But like I just said, you have to be able to find the evidence that shows that Israel actually participated in this. I will even go further. The existence of Israel in the magnitude that we're oftentimes taught about in scripture and all of that. But that's a whole nother topic. Okay, so I already talked about I already went through that. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so on this same topic, so we're staying in the Bible right now, and as we stay in this conversation, we're going to start moving out of the Bible, and we're going to actually start going into general history, outside external history, right? So we're still in the Bible right now. Now, another point that I did not hear him address is this, and that is, on one hand, we see the care and the very detail of this is how you to treat your servants. This is how you to treat your slaves and all of that. We see that, right? Okay. But when we look at it on a, what was I going to say? Hold on here. I'm losing my train of thought here for a second here. Oh, but when we look at the practice of it, that's what I was trying to say. When we look at Israel's practice, again, this is the biblical record of how to treat slaves. Well, that's a little different. And so that's what we're going to discuss now. So how many times when we read the Bible, particularly when we read the Old Testament, how God said, okay, he told the children of Israel, he said, hey, listen, what I want you to do is I want you to go and I want you to go. This is your promised land. Go. This is your promised land. What I want you to do is you got to go and take the land. How many of you been in churches where they say, we got to take the land in the name of Jesus? We got to take it. Right. And so what was demonstrated in that whole, like in the book of Joshua and all of that, is Israel physically crossing over the River Jordan and going into Canaan land and basically wiping people out. All right. And so let me highlight just some of those people and how they wiped them out, And so let me pull that up here. Let me see if I have it here. Where are you? Hold on. Give me just a moment here. Oh, here we go. Got it. Okay, so let me start off with, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 16 to 18. This is when everyone, including the animals, were to be destroyed. Now, this is all dealing with slavery, okay? When the Israelites entered into the promised land, they were instructed to destroy certain Canaanite cities entirely. And the specific command that's given in that passage is leave alive nothing that breathes, including men, women, children, and livestock. All right, so that's that. Joshua chapter 6, verse 21. This is in Jericho. That was the first city, of course, that they conquered. The command was to completely destroy the Amalekites, men, women, children, infants, and all their livestock. All right, let's move on to the next one. Numbers chapter 21, verse 2 to 3. This is the Canaanite cities at Hormah. The Israelites vowed to completely destroy these cities, and God gave them the victory. The command was the total destruction of the inhabitants and their possessions, likely including the animals. And then this other one here in Joshua chapter 10, verse 28 to 40. This was multiple cities. The command was to kill everyone in each city and leave no survivors. All right. Now let's go to one last one. I wanted to save this one last. All right. And this was, where is it? The Midianites. The Midianites. Now, God told them, he said, all the males, including male children, were to be killed. The women who had not been with a man, which means they were virgins, were to be spared and kept for themselves. So think about this for a second. Now, everything that I read to you, including that one with the Midianites, ask yourself, why are these people being wiped out? Now, when I was in Christendom, I kind of just rolled with it. I just accepted as is, right? I just accepted it as is. Hey, the real Cassandra, I appreciate you being here, but let's kind of stick to the topic, okay? You know, comparing Canaan to Canada. I'm not talking, did I mention at any time about Canada here? I did not. So I appreciate you being here, but just kind of keep it to a minimum, okay? So I just want to, I'm respecting you. I ask for the same in return, all right? Because we want to keep people focused. You can agree or disagree. I don't care too much about that, but I do want to keep people focused on the topic at hand. I'm not talking about Canada. I'm not talking about Greenland. I ain't talking about Iceland. I ain't talking about LA at all. I'm talking about this topic here, all right? So anyway, so let's just stay on that. So when you look at these things, this is like when I was in Christendom. I'm sitting here listening to this stuff being preached to me over and over again regarding, how Israel had this right to go in and just wipe people out. But have you ever stopped to think about why? What did they do wrong? What did these people actually do? And in many of these cases, when you actually look at it, their crime was that they were not worshiping their God. And so because they weren't worshiping their God, what happens? They get wiped out. They get killed. You're not worshiping our God? Okay, we out of here. We're going to cut you out. We're going to cut you off. We're going to kill every man, woman, and child. And so we just accept it as is, don't we? Many of us, because they were not worshiping that God. That was their crime, is that they Dwayne, how dare you? Because God said it and we got to do it. So, okay, so that gives you right now, you can, if people in your family aren't worshiping the God that you're worshiping, you have right to kill them, to take them out. No, we got laws against that. You understand what I'm saying? So, but this mindset, as we go on in this discussion, you're going to see this mindset being in practice still today. How Christians view Israel and their right to kind of take over whatever lands they see fit, even if it means wiping out men, women, and children. Because in the Christian eyes, they see that as a continuation of what God told them in the Bible that they had the right to do. Now, the focus I want to put on for just a moment are these Midianites. The Midianites, they got wiped out. God, according to the Bible, God told them to wipe everyone out except the women. Keep the women. So in essence, that's kind of slavery to me. I mean, it's not calling it slavery, but my point is that you wipe them out, and these women are the spoils of war. And when you look at slavery in general, one of the ways people became slaves in the first place was that they were the spoils of war. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, but you have to look at the bigger picture here. On one hand, here, the God of the Bible tells them, don't kill. But on the other hand, he's telling them to kill, kill, kill. See, these are questions for me that as a Christian, and even in the Hebrew space, I had questions about these things, but they were never answered directly. It was always explained away. Well, for me, I'm saying, no, enough of that. No, you gotta take account of these kind of things, these kind of actions, because they have real results here in 2025. You got Christians that are rah in Israel right now for doing what they're doing in Gaza. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's okay, because again, these are God's chosen people according to Christians. So you got to have, but it's amazing. You don't hear any apologists really going there and delving into this without feeling like they got to explain it away. And then let's move on. You got Paul. Now, Paul, he mentions a couple of things too about slaves. And again, you can play around. Well, it's not slaves, it's servants. It don't matter. It's pretty much the same thing. It's someone who's working under somebody. Okay, so in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5-8, it says, Paul tells slaves to obey their masters with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as if they were obeying Christ. And then Colossians chapter 3, verse 22-24, he instructs the slaves to obey their masters. So, but these like what Paul was saying, regardless if he was saying servants, you got some Christians that will say they were employees or whatever, it's like, all right, come on now. You really trying to water this down. But regardless, these passages that are in the Bible were used by people who engage in slavery. And so as we're going into this discussion, we're going to see who were the people who actually created, promoted, financed, benefited from slavery. We're going to go through all of it. We're not going to skip any parts like you have some of these other people doing. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. Okay, so how many of you have heard the pastors go into all the world and preach the gospel? All right, go into all the world. This is what they were commissioned to do. Jesus, before he left the earth, he told them, hey, listen, you go all into the world and preach the gospel. Let's stop here for a second. Let me see what this person's saying here. Let's see what this person here is saying here. He said, this brother is lost. You equate the state of Israel to the tribe of Israel from the Bible. Separate entities, brother. Be careful playing with the Most High and his people. Well, brother, tell your people that are in the state of Israel right now in Dimona, you may need to send them that message first, because they are over there right now actually employed by the state of Israel. So before you try to bring smoke over here, you may want to talk to your people over there first. And while you're at it, another thing you want to do is you may want to talk to a lot of Black Americans who call themselves Israelites or Hebrews, who have actually moved over there outside of Dimona, who are actually playing, or they're working as musicians. They actually have jobs over there. They're teaching. They're doing all kinds of things over there because they see them as one and the same. You might want to talk to the people in Dimona, go back to Dimona and talk to their leaders, because their leaders said out of their own mouths that they not only believe that the state of Israel is their land, but they are in 100% agreement with the state of Israel. So before you come here, you might want to go back a little bit and cover those bases first. And then while you're at it, you might want to also look at the fact that you and the people of the state of Israel, not all of them, but the Orthodox Jews that are over there, you share the same text. It's called the Torah. So you might want to start there first before you start telling people who's lost and who isn't. Okay? So you're more than welcome to stay, and you're more than welcome to listen, and you're even more than welcome to participate. But make sure that before you go there, make sure you know what you're talking about. Okay? Because we've gone through these things in great extent, on this platform, and you're more than welcome to go through all of that. All right? But that's not a distraction at all. I just want to, use that as, hey, let's go, because I'm ready. You know what I'm saying? I'm ready. Okay, so let's move on here. Let's see, we talked about that, Paul. We talked about Paul. Okay, go into all the world. Now, this is something that some of y'all may know about this. Some of y'all may not. Okay, so when we talk about, when the Bible says, go into all the world and preach the gospel, right? That's what Jesus said. Go into all the world, preach the gospel. And then what else did he say? He also said, there's many times in the Bible it's mentioned to the ends of the earth. To the ends of the earth. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. And then, like I said, then there's many scriptures that talk about the references of going to the ends of the earth. Now, when you look at the map here, now these are just rough sketches here of maps here that people, they basically looked at the Bible, looked at church history records, and they put this together. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this up on the screen so you can look that up. All right, look it up on your own. So hopefully you can see that here. So this right here, it shows Paul. It's mainly Paul. All right. So Paul was just, he was, this is one person. But this shows all the places that Paul went. Right. So that's Paul. Now, when you look at this map here, this shows kind of where all the apostles supposedly are buried. So it shows that these apostles, you had apostles going into India, you had apostles going, one apostle went to Matthew, supposedly went to Ethiopia. That's still up in the air. Cyprus, you have Barnabas, Mark, Britain, supposedly Simon, he went there, so what you're seeing right here on this map, hopefully you can see it there. These are all the places that these apostles supposedly went. They were, because according to the Bible, they were being obedient to what Jesus told them to do. He said, go into all the world and preach the gospel. Well, to them, this was the world. But notice where they didn't go. Because like I said, it's questionable that Matthew went to Ethiopia. You're going to find some debate on that, and we've talked about that as well. But outside of, let's just give them Ethiopia. But outside of Ethiopia, you're not going to read about any apostles going to in Central Africa, Southern Africa. You're not going to read about apostles going to, I'm calling these by modern names, but whatever they were called then. You're not going to read apostles going to Australia or New Zealand, or you're not going to read about them going to Hawaii or, in the Americas. They didn't go to any of these areas. Why is that? Wait a minute. Jesus said to go into all the world and preach the gospel. But he also was saying that you hear several times, to the ends of the earth. Now, did you know about this? Because many of you, I don't know if you knew about this or not. How many of you have heard of, wait a minute, let me go here. Hispaniola, that is pretty much the part of that Europe part in that Mediterranean area, where it's Spain and Portugal around that area, right? Hispaniola. Now, a quick assignment for you. I want you to do a Google search. You can do it right now if you like. Do a search for the ends of the earth. The phrase, the ends of the earth. It was a nickname for Hispaniola. You can look it up. It was a nickname. It was a name when they referred to Hispaniola, Spain, Portugal as the ends of the earth. Why is that? Because at that time in history, that's all they knew. That's as far as it goes. They didn't know that there was more land out there. They didn't know there was more people out there. But to them, it was the ends of the earth. So Hispaniola is known as the ends of the earth. So anytime you see this in the Bible, when it's mentioned in the Bible, that is what it's referring to. When we read it in our 2025 mind, we've taken that and expanded to everything that we know so far about the earth. But in reality, though, in their time, they were being obedient because they went to all of these places that they considered the earth. When it comes to Africa, when it comes to the rest of Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and we've done videos on this. We talk about how you had kingdoms in other parts of Africa that go 50, 60,000, 70,000 years in the past. And we talked about you had a kingdom in India that goes even older than that. So you had ancient kingdoms in the continent of Africa. You had ancient kingdoms on the continent of Africa. You had ancient kingdoms in what we call today the Americas. None of this is covered in the Bible. But when people pick up the Bible and they say, this is my only historical source, look how much you leave out. See, that's where the Billy Carsons and all them come in, unfortunately, and they talk about these things. But even with that, you got to be, you got to keep your head on a swivel, even what they present, because some of the stuff they put in there, they start blending in aliens and spaceships and stuff like that and all this stuff. I'm not saying none of that happened, but my point is you still got to check and double check even with that. But the facts is that we do have archaeological proof and evidence that you had kingdoms and civilizations that were around way before what was going on in the Mesopotamian area and Mediterranean area. And when they would say the world, this is how they viewed the world, was this is it. You understand what I'm saying? So anyway, let's move on. Where am I right now? The ends of the earth, I explained that. Now, let's get to this part here, where we talk about how Christians, one of the things that Christians do, and I would say, what do you call it? Apologists, Christian apologetics do. They do this thing where they love to delineate. They love to delineate from their own history. And let me give you an example here. The church, as we know, Christianity as we know it today, isn't exactly what it was then. Christianity and what we call the Catholic Church was one and the same. And I'm going to lay out the full evidence with receipts and prove that point. So when you hear about Christianity during that time, it encompassed the Church of Rome. It encompassed that. In fact, your Bible, you would not have your Bible today if it wasn't for Rome. You could say what you will about Rome and say it's Babylon. You could say that the Pope is the Antichrist. You could say all of that all day and all night. It don't matter. At the end of the day, you would not have your Bible if it wasn't for Rome. So anybody that wants to, Christian out there that wants to try to delineate themselves, or Hebrew or whatever, you trying to delineate yourself from the Catholic Church, which means universal. The word Catholic just means universal, or the universal church, right? If someone calls himself Catholic, what you're saying is, I am a member of the universal Christian church, right? That's what it means. It's Christian. And what Christians, and so what you had, and then you had, what's his name? Martin Luther comes along, then you have like the Great Divide, and then you had or even before that, you had the Protestant movement and all that stuff, right? So you had Protestants or protesting the church. Well, they were protesting the Church of England, my bad. But you had people who basically tore away from this church, the Church of Rome, and say, hey, we're going to do our own thing. We're tearing away from this church. And we're going to start out, we're protesting the church. So that's what they did. They tore away. And that's from there, that's when you start getting all of these, different denominations and all that as the years progress. Right. And so what happens is that, but the Bible that they received, that they had, regardless of what direction they went in, that Bible came from Rome. It came from Rome, period. Someone saying Isaiah 40:31. I don't know what's happening to you. I see your comment. It says the Bible also says that the word, I'm just stopping here for a minute. I don't think anybody's blocking you, sis. Here's your comment right here. You can see it. Okay, so there's your comment right here. I don't think so. Sometimes there's a delay, or whatever, but I don't think anybody's taking anything, deleting you. As long as you're not being disruptive, which you're not, and you don't, all the times you've been on here, you've never been. So just chalk it up as some kind of delay, but I can see your comment. Okay. But anyway, let's move on. I just wanted to be clear with that. But anyway, so your Bible, And this is something I want to make very clear, because a lot of people in your minds, you kind of think that the Bible just fell out of the sky and it just landed in your lap. No, it came from Rome. You got it from Rome, y'all. You can't get around that. You cannot get around that. It came from Rome, right? When you read the history on all that stuff, we've shown you all kinds of stuff on that. Let me pull up something here. Hold on for a second. I just thought of this here. Hold on. Let's see. Saints. Hold on, y'all. Hold on a second. Hold on. Give me just a moment. Saint Jerome. Let me show you, for example. Saint Jerome, he translated the Bible into Latin, okay? And what his translation, it serves as the foundation of all the Bibles that we have today. All right, I'm trying to pull something up here. Saint Jerome. Now, let me pull this up here. I would have had it up already if I had known I was going to mention him. This is Saint Jerome. These are depictions of Saint Jerome. You notice anything here? Notice the skull sitting on his desk. Now, this man was tasked by Rome to translate the Bible. That his translation was used as the basis for all the Bibles we have today. But why has he got a skull everywhere he goes? It's just a question. I mean, I can speculate on that, but it's just a question. Do you understand what I'm saying? So anyway, let's move on. I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, so let's see. Let's explain. So what Christians or Christian apologists, what they try to do is, well, that's the Catholic Church. That's Rome. They ain't us. They always try to find ways to delineate, but the foundation of what you both stand on, you share the same foundation historically. So you cannot do that. So what this allows people like Wes Huff and other Christian apologists to do is it allows them to cut away from, no, whatever Rome did, whatever those Catholic people did, that's on them. But us as Christians, oh no, we never participated in any of that. So it makes it a lot easier for them to make this argument where Christians, well, we didn't do anything. We fought against slavery, so they can make a very clean argument without including the rest of their history. But what we're doing this evening is that we're saying, no, we're looking at all of these people that were in your family. And we're saying, no, we got to look at all of this stuff. All right. So let's move on. So now let's take a look at such a world, Christianity, the rest of the world. Okay. Now going back to that map that I showed you, the way Christianity was spread in that area, Mesopotamian area, Mediterranean area, where Christianity, the way that was spread, it was spread mostly by word of mouth, right? People were talked to, they were preached to, and they had churches and all that stuff. But when they went to the dark sections of town, when they crossed the railroad tracks, for some of you old people, when they went down south, well, the gospel message it came with something else, didn't it? Yes, it came with the tip of a gun. It came with the tip of a sword. The message turned different, didn't it? There was no longer this peace and love and can we all get along stuff. It was like, no, you gonna get along. And we're gonna show you this. All right, so let's go to, and these are things I've talked about over the years, but I always enjoy covering this stuff. Here's one here. This is Pope Nicholas V. All right, this is your Christian history that some of y'all like to skip over. But like I said, we're not doing this. Pope Nicholas V. and the Portuguese slave trade. Anything that I show on this, and I know sometimes people will ask for, hey, can you give me a link or whatever? Just take a screenshot, you'll find it. All right, so Pope Nicholas, I would encourage you to read this whole page here, but I highlighted something for you. Now, Pope Nicholas V, he came out with what's called a Papal Bull. Now, a Papal Bull is basically a declaration, right? It's an official declaration. Now, he's not the only one that came out with Papal Bulls. There were other ones as well. We're going to talk about another one shortly. But I want you to take a listen to this specific Papal Bull that he put out here. All right? It's going to give you a little bit of history, and then it's going to get into the specifics on what he said. All right? So I want you to pay very close attention to what's being said here. 15th year Iberian legal traditions regulated Christians' treatment of Jews, Muslims, and other Christians, clearly delineating, for example, who was enslavable and who was not. In contrast, the judicial status of people who did not fit these categories was more ambiguous. Hear that? Legal and philosophical arguments to address this issue began to evolve during the second half of the 15th century, once Portuguese mariners began to return to Iberia with captives acquired in West Africa and West Central Africa. Notably, the treatment of quote-unquote black Gentiles was addressed in 1452 and 1455 when Pope Nicholas V issued a series of papal bulls that granted Portugal the right to enslave, guess what? Sub-Saharan Africans. Church leaders argued that slavery served as a natural deterrent and Christianizing influence to barbarous behavior amongst pagans. Using this logic, the Pope issued a mandate to the Portuguese king, Alfonso V, and instructed him, all right, I told you this is your Christian history that Wes Huff, and other people like to skip over, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, I guess that's how you say it, and pagans whatsoever, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. This is coming out of the head of the Christian movement. You hear what I'm just saying here? To reduce their persons to perpetual slavery and to apply and to appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, countries, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit. Let me just let that settle in for a moment there. All right. I'm just waiting, getting people to catch up here. All right. Let me continue to read this here. Now, this is the English translation of at least an excerpt of this. We therefore, weighing all and singular the premise with due meditation, and noting that since we have had formerly by other letters of our granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and to subdue all Saracens, I guess that's how you say it, and pagans whatsoever, and to other enemies of Christ. And other enemies of Christ, wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. Okay, so that I just reread what I read earlier. Oh, Saracens. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I see that. Appreciate that. So this is what they said. This is coming out of the mouth, the head of Christianity at that time. You can't talk around this and claim to be a Christian and say that Christians had nothing to do with slavery. I'm showing you the receipts here, showing you that, yeah, they did. They most certainly did. This is just one of them. Here's another one here. This is another Papa Bull that was put out by Pope Alexander, I think that's the 6th. And this was called the Doctrine of Discovery. The bull stated that any land not inhabited by who? Christians was available to be discovered, claimed, and exploited by Christian rulers, and declared that the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere, increased and spread, that the health of souls be cared for, and that the barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. This doctrine of discovery became the basis of all European claims in the Americas, as well as the foundation for the United States Western expansion. In the U.S. Supreme Court, in the 1823 case Johnson versus McIntosh, Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion in a unanimous decision held that the principle of the discovery gave European nations an absolute right to the New World lands. In essence, American Indians had only a right of occupancy, which could be abolished. This is all in the name of Christianity. You cannot delineate, you cannot run from your history. This is your history, Christian. This is your Christian history. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on, because there's a lot more here. I'm trying to get through it here. Now, in addition to that, you also had Jews. Now, this is a part where we're going to get into, when we're talking about Jews here. I've noticed that you have people who are, both the Christian apologists and also people who are maybe agnostic or, atheists or whatever, because these groups oftentimes go head to head. You see them all the time on YouTube. But when it comes to the topic of Jews, they tend to back off of that. Like they're afraid. Oh, we're not going to talk about them. We can't talk about them because you're going to be anti-Semitic. I'm just looking at the history. I'm just looking at the receipts here. That's all I'm doing. I ain't saying nothing about burn their houses down or they need this or that or whatever. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just looking at the receipts. Now, Christians have maintained through all of this time, now Jews, there's been some back and forth when you go through the years where Christians were going after Jews and they went to flush them out. You can go, there's a long history of that. But there was always this undercurrent. How could I put this? There was always an undercurrent there. Sometime, at some points in history, it was very faint, and some points it was very strong. When you look at like the British monarchy or whatever, you'll see that in some cases they claim to be the real children of Israel. I mean, this thing gets very deep, where they say, nah, they ain't the Jew. They're not the chosen people. We're the chosen people, and it's all of that. But Christianity, by and large, in 2025 today, tends to lean heavily on this belief that the people that we call Jews today are, in fact, the people of the Bible. Okay. Now, I know I may have some Hebrews out here that may say, no, they're not. That's it. Just walk with me for a moment. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what Christianity says. All right. And, but yeah, so these Christians have always walked side by side, to the most part, with that's right. People saying it's called the British Israelism. Yeah, you got the British who they believe they're part of the house of God. All of that. They're part of the 12 tribes of Israel. That kind of stuff. And we can get all into that too. But anyway, therefore, we have to continue to keep our eyes on these Jews and the role that they played. We're getting to slavery here. right? So Jews had a particular person that they all looked up to. And if you talk to many rabbis today, they will still say this, that it's a gentleman by the name of Maimonides. Maimonides. He's a rabbi, old rabbi, and he contributed heavily to, their extra books, the Jews and their Talmud. He contributed heavily to that. So he's, very well studied when it comes to the Torah. And then they take the Torah, and the Talmud basically is a series of these different rabbis over the years who have given their own personal interpretation of what the Torah is saying, right? And so anyway, and then I could get into the Torah and where some of that comes from. It's a lot. We've covered this, but anyway, the Torah, these rabbis, that's all they do. And when you see rabbis today, when you look at Jews today, particularly, and I'm talking like Orthodox Jews, they have schools that they dedicate where all they do is study the Torah day in and day out. That's all they do. They don't work jobs or anything like that. They just go to school. Don't believe me? Go up into Brooklyn, New York area. They got schools all over the place where that's all they do. And then they also study the other Jewish writings and stuff as well, right? Okay, so Maimonides, he was an individual that's seen as like, he's the most revered, right? When it comes to being one of the main rabbis out there, okay? Now, Maimonides said something. Again, these are the God's chosen people, right? These are God's chosen people. Well, let's take a look according to Christians. Well, let's take a listen to how Maimonides is something he said some time ago. All right, let me pull this up. It's right here. All right, so this is Maimonides. Those who are outside the city are all human individuals who have no doctrinal belief, neither one based on speculation, nor one that accepts the authority of tradition. Such individuals are the furthermost Turks found in the remote north, the Negroes found in the remote south, and those who resemble them from among them that are with us in these climes. The status, now check this out, keep listening. The status of those is like that of irrational animals. Again, you cannot talk around this stuff. This time, I don't care if you're a Christian or a Jew. You cannot talk around this. To my mind, they do not have the rank of men, but have among the beings a rank lower than the rank of man, but higher than the rank of the apes. Let me go through that again. Let me just read that last part again. To my mind, this is Maimonides saying this. To my mind, they do not have the rank of men, but have among the beings a rank lower than the rank of man, but higher than the rank of the apes. Now, just a little kind of extra to throw out here. It's not a coincidence that Hollywood came out with a movie called The Planet of the Apes. That's not a coincidence. We've actually talked about that too. The producers behind that, when they came out with the movie, who did they go to first? They went to, it was like Compton area. When Planet of the Apes, when the first one came out, they immediately went into the South LA area to a theater. And they said, we're going to pre-screen it there, and we're going to see how these black folks react to it. And they said they sat up surprised because, black folks, we would, how we just be screaming and yelling, talking back to the screen. They were like, oh my God, these people are they're actually with it. I'm trying to give you a lesson here. I'm trying to tell you some history here. All right, let me read that part again, and we'll continue to read the highlighted part. To my mind, they do not have the rank of men, but have among the beings a rank lower than the rank of a man. Let's go on here. Let's see. Then the rank of the apes, for they have the external shape and lineaments, I guess, of a man, and a faculty of discernment that is superior to that of the apes. Those who are within the city but have turned their backs upon the ruler's habitation are people who have opinions and are engaged in speculation, but who have adopted incorrect opinions either because of some great error that befell them in the course of their speculation, or because of their following the tradition authority of one who hath fallen into error. Accordingly, because of these opinions, the more these people walk, the greater is their distance from the ruler's habitation. And they are far worse than the first. They are those concerning whom necessity at certain times impels killing them and blotting out their traces of their options, lest they should lead astray the ways of others. That's a mouthful, ain't it? But these are Christians that have maintained that these are God's chosen people. Why we don't hear anything about that? Now, why am I bringing this up? Because it was this basis, this ideology. And it's funny because I remember now, I was going back and forth. It was like one of my first Twitter accounts. And this was the height of the whole, Hebrews and Negroes, the whole thing with the basketball player, all of that. You remember all of that? And it was really cracking down then, all these platforms. And it was this dude that just came out of nowhere, he was saying some stupid stuff, things that were historically inaccurate, and saying, the Jews and the blacks, they always work together. We should see each other as one and all of that. So I was like, let's look at some history here. So I started showing him some history on some stuff, right? And he was getting mad. You just that or whatever. All I was giving him was screenshots of stuff. This stuff like I'm showing you right now. And when I showed him this one that I just showed you just now, Maimonides and what he said, next thing I know, my account, it wasn't just in timeout. They deleted it. They deleted that thing. They said, nah, get your black butt out of here with that. But they can't deny this. This is from Maimonides. This is their guy. Well, let's continue on because I got more to show you on this. Now, I'm not going to sit up here and say that Jews were the only ones that were participating in the slave trade because that is not accurate. That's not true. You had other people, participants in the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, so let me be ultra clear with that. Ultra clear. All right. However, that does not exclude the fact that Jews were, in fact, very much part of the transatlantic slave trade. There were ships that were owned by them. All right. But you also had owners here on this side, here on the America side. As soon as I can get this up here, hold on. Many of you have seen these things here. These are private sale receipts of Jewish families. A lot of these people were Sephardic Jews who owned, traded, sold, bought black or Africans as slaves. There was even one account where they said in the city of Charleston or Charlestown, South Carolina, there were so many of them there. They shut down the trading market. Actually got shut down. Was shut down on Saturdays because it was the Sabbath. Some of the largest synagogues that you will find during that time were in places where there was a high amount of slave trading that was going on, slave marketing that was going on. And that was in Charleston, South Carolina, and also down in Brazil. Some of the largest, and then points in between, you'll find it. But those two areas for sure stick out because they had very large communities down there. They didn't just wander down there and were just sitting there and that's it. No, they were down there. And then we can talk about the owners of these. Oh, yeah. So I'm glad you said that, Mackenzie. I'm getting to touch on that in a moment here. I'm just showing the people here just how evolved these people are. These are God's chosen people. These are God's chosen people. I'm just showing you history. All right. It goes on and on and on. I got a whole lot of them. Whole lot of them. And what Mackenzie just brought up, which is a good point, when you go into like Jamaica, for example, Jamaica, some of the richest families that are in Jamaica are Jewish, but they didn't just end up there. They were there for generations and generations. They were the ones that were enslaving these Africans that they bought over as slaves for sugar and tobacco and all that stuff. And they kept saving their coins. And now to this day, their families are seen as some of the richest in places like Jamaica. Haiti, the richest man in Jamaica is a Jewish person. The whole island is pretty much going to hell in a handbasket. But it's really interesting when you go to all of these Caribbean islands, look at who the top families are. A lot of times you got to dig a little bit. And so this still goes on. So these people were very much involved in the transatlantic slave trade. When we talk about, like I said, the owning of ships, we talked about that. When we even talk about cotton, I've talked about this as well. Cotton was a very huge thing, and you'll find that they were very much involved in that. In fact, when you hear about, what is it, in New York City, the, where they do the, all the sewing, y'all, the back in the day, it's a famous section in New York City. I'm trying to think of it right now. Where they would do, it was known for all the sewing and stuff that goes on there. Someone put it in the comments for me. Let me know. Remind me. What was it? It's a section of town. It was known for that. But anyway, it was something row. It's coming to me. My brain, come on, brain. You almost got it. It was something row. But anyway, guess who was running all of those? You ever, let's put it this way. When you hear about sweatshops in New York City, these sweatshops where you had all of these people working their hands off the bone. Garment industry, go ahead. You've been on point tonight, Ty. You've been on point tonight. Anyway, the garment industry. There you go. The garment district. And so guess who owned a lot of those shops in the garment district? And guess where they were getting their cotton from? Do you understand what I'm saying? God's chosen people. And the Christians defended this. This goes out way far. Again, these are things that oftentimes get left out when you listen to Christians say, oh, we had nothing to do with Christianity. I mean, we had nothing to do with slavery. But in reality, yes, you did. Plantation owners. We talked about that. In some cases, you had Jews that were in that. Banks. We itemized that. We looked at these banks. It's itemized. I showed you this stuff. Itemized. All the presidents, all the co-chairs, all of that stuff. We showed you that in many cases it was them. This is all historically supported. The same banks that were making a profit off of us. This gentleman here, we did a video on him. Let me see if I can find him real quick. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see what his name is. Here we go. His name is Judah P. Benjamin. Judah P. Benjamin. Here we go. Oh, not that. Oh, sorry about that. Judah P. Benjamin. He worked for the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America. Now notice, he has his picture on the money. And guess what the money was backed by? Slaves. Judah P. Benjamin played a very critical role in establishing the different banks that were all throughout the Confederate South. And these banks, they were getting their money from the benefit of black or Africans that were bought over as slaves. They were trading us. They were literally trading us. We were stock. These are God's chosen people. See, this is the part that, again, I challenge these Christian apologists. I challenge these people that want to say that you had nothing at all to do with slavery. But when I bring this stuff up, they ain't nothing to say on this. Because to this day, you're still trying to say, well, hey, God shows the people, you can't touch not God's anointed. You say it, but I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the whole picture then. Let's look at it. Banks, general stores. There are many stores in the South that was the family owned, that was owned by these people. Many of those stores that you see like during the civil rights era where black folks were sitting at the lunch counters and they were being pushed out. Remember that? Guess who owned a lot of those stores? God's chosen people. Okay, so now we're almost finished here. Go ahead. Okay, so now let's take it back a little bit. Now, the argument that a lot of times Christians like to bring up is, well, we actually fought against it. It was Christianity that brought an end to the transatlantic slave trade. It was Christians that stood up to shut this thing down. Well, let's take a look at it and let's be honest here. Yeah. So tonight, what we have covered is that what we have done so far is that we looked at what Christianity actually meant historically. We're not delineating from any of it, because what they try to do is they try to delineate. Oh no, it ain't had nothing to do with Rome. It had nothing to do with that. No, we put that, we took care of that. No, it's all Christianity. Because like I said, what they try to do, these Christians, they'll say, no, they're Catholics, there's something different. But see, you don't say that when y'all doing a protest against abortion. Now, all of a sudden, we're all Christians. Or when you're doing something, let's say, all of these Christian television networks. How many times have you seen Catholic bishops or whatever go through their priests and stuff, go through on Christian television, and they all work together when they want to. But then all of a sudden, when we talk about slavery, oh no, that was something different. They had nothing to do with Christianity. No, we ain't gonna do that. We're not gonna do that when history. We're gonna look at the whole thing. We're gonna look at the whole thing. So anyway, so when they say, well, Christians fought against slavery, historically, they're absolutely right. And I do not at all deny that. We don't deny that at all. Christians led the way in many ways when it came to being abolitionists, anti-slavery. You'll find that, as someone, product of the Northeast, I've heard a lot of stories about the Amish and what they did as far as working, hiding slaves and being abolitionists. I did a video a while back in New Jersey. I showed you one of the houses that they used to actually hide them. It's actually standing still to this day. It's a drugstore, and it was a drugstore, I think, back then. And upstairs, all in a room, they were showing you, you can hide, they were hiding folks and all this stuff. So lots of history when it comes to this, where Christians did, in fact, take the lead in this. But let's tell the entire story. You do not get to start an institution that's a crime, profit from it, wait over 100 years, literally an entire century, profit off of it after a century, and then turn around and say, throw your hands up and say, you know what, slavery is bad. We're done with slavery. We got a new revelation. Slavery is not good for us. We need to get away from it. You don't get to do that. That's like me saying that I am the hero when the whole time I'm profiting off of being the villain. Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't get to do that. And that's what a lot of these individuals do. When they want to talk about the history of Christianity as it pertains to slavery, they want to pick and choose certain parts of history and try to paint over certain things and say, well, no, we ain't had nothing to do with that. That was them. No, this is your entire history. So like I said, and let me repeat again, you don't get to start this demonic institution, profit from it, make your money, and then a century later, all of a sudden you get a new revelation and say, well, we're done with it. Let's lead the way now. And we're supposed to sit back and say, oh, the Christians, we just so thank you. We thank you so much for leading the way, for being the light, and dismantling slavery. You started it, and you profited from it, and you still are profiting from it. Just saying. And what was the other thing I was going to say? It was something else I was going to say too about that. I can't remember now. I think that's it. That's why I'm glad I wrote everything down here. But let's see. So you don't get to do that. So we're not going to do any more wordplay. That's why I said we're not going to do any more wordplay as far as Christian versus a servant or whatever. That's what, well, Paul was saying this, but he was really meaning this. And, and you got to, it's just Christianity was hijacked by some people who took it out of context. No, and absolutely no. That's not what happened at all. We looked at Christianity history as is, and we showed you with their own historical receipts. They're the ones that kicked this whole thing. They profited and benefited off of it for well over a century. And then they decided to get new religion and say, you know what, it's a bad thing. We're done with it. But they weren't even completely done with it, because they brought in Jim Crow. But see, if you want to continue to talk about, let's say, the Catholic Church, which is, like we saying it's a Christian church. If you want to continue to have that, then I would to talk about this and their involvement in how Black people were being mistreated. Then I invite you to go back to a video that I just did. I had to post it on Odyssey. I invite you to watch that video. This is in Harlem, New York. It was a hospital. It was called Incarnation Hospital, Incarnation something hospital. This is a Catholic hospital where, as recent as the late 80s, early 90s, during that whole AIDS breakout, they were experimenting on Black children. It was doing whole experiments on Black children. And I went through the details on this, on that broadcast. But basically, I'll share this with you. In this Catholic hospital, and it's still standing to this day, some of the experiments, including them slicing open the stomachs of Black children that they said were suffering from AIDS and force feeding them all of these pharmaceuticals from the pharmaceutical companies. This is all done under the guise of Christianity and Christian love. Many of the missionaries that went out, are they doing good things? Yeah, to a measure. But it's also being used to do some other things that aren't good either. So you don't get to pick and choose. I do the same thing. I do the same thing when I'm talking to Hebrews. Same thing. You don't treat like history like some kind of buffet where you get to pick and choose. You got to look at all of it. You understand what I'm saying? And then from that, then you can kind of say, all right, man, now what do I need to learn from this? You know what I'm saying? But when you start picking things out, you're not even teaching yourself an honest lesson. You understand what I'm saying? So again, so to conclude here, and like I said, I don't want to go too long here. I don't have any beef. I don't have any issue at all with Wes Huff. I don't have any issue at all with any Christians or, Hebrew Israelites or anything like that. I don't at all. I have any personal things, unless they got something. And I know there's plenty of them that do have some personal things with me, but I sleep very well at night, and none of them are coming immediately to mind that I can think of right now. So I don't have any issues like that. But when it comes to, if we're going to have a conversation about history, you got to make sure it's accurate. You got to make sure that you're being truthful. You know what I'm saying? And what we try to do this evening during this broadcast is to do just that, to look at history from a more holistic perspective. We're going to include all of it. And then we're going to leave it up to you ultimately as the viewer and as the listener to decide where to go from there on that. Okay. It's not my job to tell you, okay, so this is how you need to think, or this is what you need to do and all that. No, I'm just putting it out here and encouraging you to take everything that I said, everything I shared this evening, and you can research it more on your own. But when it comes to Christians and Christianity, you do not get the right to pick and choose parts of your history. You have a very evil, a very wicked, a very demonic, but in the midst of that, there is some good too. You got some wonderful people out here who call themselves, who are Christians. I'll admit to that too. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's very true. You got some wonderful people out here who claim to be Hebrews. I admit to that too. I have no problem. But we have to be honest when we're looking at the foundation of these belief systems. And then it's up to you who follow these things to make up your mind where you're going to go with it. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. That's all I have. And I love having these kind of discussions and going through this stuff. I don't hold myself as any kind of expert on any of this stuff, but I do take the time, and I really like listening, and I really like learning. I like reading. I like investigating all this stuff. And I'm glad to have at least some of y'all here willing to listen and do with it as you will on that. Okay. But that's all I have for you this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in to this broadcast. I hope it's helped you out in some kind of way. You guys take care, and I will see you again soon. Take care now. Thanks again.